Hello and welcome to the Music Survival Guide podcast, episode number 10, the big 10. Is this our celebratory episode, Joe?
I think so.
10 whole episodes, kind of 11 with that bonus one that I did. Hooray! How are you?
I'm doing really good, mate. Well, I lie. I'm actually really cold, but that's just because it's, as we're recording this, it's November, and it's gone horrendously cold. How are you?
Have you ever heard of heating?
I have, but I meant outside, because I was attempting to, not be in studio mode and actually leave and see some of the outdoors. So I went to go see some fireworks last night, and it was horrendously cold.
I can imagine. I'm good. I'm warm. I'm nice and warm. I've got a cup of tea. I'm very happy. So, Joe, what are we talking about this week?
So this week, as premised in our previous episode, we are doing our first challenge. We are doing a home studio setup challenge.
What does that entail?
So the basic outline of it is that we're each going to have a hypothetical £1,000 to spend on one site to keep it fair. And by the end, we want to give you, the listener, the gear list that you can take. And if you were to get, you could get a quality recording production that is ready to be mixed and could rival any other band in your area.
So the website we are using for transparency and full disclosure is toman.de, /GB, I think is the website. Anyway, seemingly everyone knows about Toman, and there seems to be always a debate about whether it's Toman or Toman. I've heard both. Where do you come on the argument?
I think I'm Toman.
Controversial. Maybe it's a northern-southern thing, but that's...
I was going to say north-south divide, but you're from Yorkshire.
I'm from Yorkshire. So we're using Toman, and there are several kind of ground rules that we have set up for ourselves. So we are making sure everything is full price on that website. If there's any sort of sales or any reductions or anything like that, we are ignoring that. We are going for full price, just to kind of be fair. And as we record it, Black Friday is kind of around the corner, so we had to kind of be careful about what we were choosing. And everything has to be brand new, so we can't go used for any of this stuff. Now, it's worth pointing out that if I were to have an actual £1,000 as opposed to a metaphorical £1,000, and I was setting this up, I would very much look, especially for microphones, in the second-hand market, because you can get some really good deals and save quite a lot of money. It's just worth pointing out, really.
Yeah, the same goes for B-Stock, really. There's a lot to be said for trawling the internet and finding really good bargains, but there's no point in us finding, a one-off bargain that no one else can replicate. So we just kind of want to even the playing field a little bit, not turn it into a research eBay bidding war, and just kind of make it everyone gets $1,000 and see what we can do from there.
Happy days. It's also worth pointing out before we really kind of get into the subject that all the prices that we referenced were kind of correct at time of recording to add up to 1,000. So if you decide to go onto the website and follow all the links, which I'm going to include in the show notes to everything, and you go, hang on, that's £1,001, how dare you? Sorry, is all I can say, but at the time of recording, it was correct.
Which is the day after Bonfire Night, so it is 6th of November.
Oh, I didn't think we'd be dating them.
Well, then it makes sense for when we got it.
That's true. So as I say, we're ignoring Black Friday sales, because that's a potential dangerous thing. Joe, are there any other things to be said for this before we kind of launch into what we've got?
So the thing I think we also need to highlight is that we're doing two different setups. Although I think there's still quite a lot of crossover. You're mostly focusing on the rock and metal side, and I'm kind of taking it from pop up to indie rock. Kind of, so we're kind of covering the broad spectrum between us. So there will be obvious differences between the two, because some genres require others. But I think it's an advice buffet. You can pick and choose. Yes.
Just because I say this is what I would buy, but if you're in a rock band, it doesn't mean you must buy that and nothing else will work. This is all down to opinion, if I'm really honest with you, because a lot of microphone choices especially are down to opinion. And there's usually, for any given source, whatever you want to record, there are a myriad of options. There are literally hundreds of options, say, to record a guitar. So just because we pick one mic, that doesn't necessarily mean that nothing else in the world will work. Just worth pointing out. So the final thing that's probably worth pointing out is we are making a few assumptions, and there's a few things that we are leaving out, which you may consider cheating, but there we are. Such is life. We are assuming you have a good computer, whatever that may be. It can be a Mac or PC. I don't know why I'm saying it that way. Just because if we were to include a computer in £1,000, most of it would go on the computer, which is unfortunate, but there we are. We are not including microphone stands, and we are not including XLRs. So XLR cables between your audio interface and your microphones. They can get quite expensive, just full disclosure. But again, if we were to include that kind of thing, we the amount of money we'd have to spend on microphones and audio interfaces and etc. Would be severely reduced. So we're kind of focusing on, aside from the computer, the more expensive stuff, I guess.
Yeah, there are so many variables, especially with XLRs and stuff like that, that we don't know the size of the room that you're recording in.
Quite true.
So we don't want to say, oh, you can get all this for this amount of money, and then you go, well, Joe and Phil, well, we couldn't. Our live room is the Sistine Chapel, so we require 600-meter long XLRs. Yeah, it's so you're just going to have to deal with the XLRs by yourself. One caveat I would like to throw in about the computer, though, is that computers now, I'd say a good student laptop is good enough to do a professional recording on.
Yep.
I don't think you kind of have to go hell for leather and kind of buy like a Mac Pro, one of those towers that can start like around about $2,000 or $3,000. I think now most people have a laptop that you can do a decent amount of recording on. Let's face it, with the budget that we've got, we're not going to be doing orchestra recording with 32 inputs.
Oh.
So, have I spoilt your intro?
Maybe. No. Anyway, you don't want to buy a Mac because Macs are rubbish. Ooh.
Well, that's an argument for another time. Okay, so Phil, do you want to start from the top?
Yes, and I'm strangely nervous about this. I feel like I'm going to be inquisitioned, that's a phrase, about my choices. So my first choice is for my audio interface, because to do recording you just need an audio interface. For anyone not in the know, it is the box that sits in between your computer and your microphones and allows you to plug one into the other. That's at a very basic level, that is what it does. And it is absolutely essential. I have chosen, perhaps controversially, the PreSonus Studio 1810C. Also worth saying,
wow,
you don't need to write down these things, because I'm going to include them in the show notes. So don't worry about all the numbers. So here's my thinking. It's got 4 microphone preamps, so you can record 4 channels at the same time. It's got 2 headphone outputs. So say you are the guitarist in your band and you're recording drums, you can listen to the music being recorded as well as the drummer, which is really important. You need to the person recording and the person playing both need to be able to hear what is happening. But also, what actually drew me to it is that the mic preamps have 80 decibels of gain, which is really high.
Wow.
Yeah. So most conventional audio interface preamps have anywhere between about 50 to 70 is quite standard. 80 is really quite high. So 80 decibels gives you loads of space to record, and it means that your noise floor, which is kind of the electrical signals and various ambient room sounds that you don't really want, cannot be heard when you record, especially when you record quiet things. It's just really good. It's really worth thinking about. Joe, do you have any questions for me on that one, or not really?
No, I'm going to reserve my questions till later on. I'm going to start throwing some scenarios at you.
Oh, good.
But one thing I do ask is, what is the connection from that to your computer?
It's USB.
Oh, okay. I'll allow it.
It's USB 2, but I think it's also USB-C if you've got a universal connector. If you start doing Thunderbolt, I don't do Thunderbolt because I'm on a PC. So that's why that's my logical thinking.
Yeah. Okay.
So my next item, this is probably a surprise to literally nobody, is one of my first microphone choices is a Shure SM57. Shock horror.
Right.
What a choice. So it is one of the most universal microphones ever. A lot of recordings include an SM57. They are really good on snare drums, and they're really good on guitar amps. And at a push, they can be really good on vocals and things like that. We'll cover vocals in a moment. We'll come to that. But especially guitars and snare drums, they are pretty standard.
Any loud source, I'd say.
Yeah, that's fair. An
SM57 is great. I think the other thing to point out is for a sub £100 mic, it is built like a tank.
It is.
You will not have to worry about putting that near, a snare drum and it getting whacked. They could resist gunfire. Those things, they are insanely well built.
And it's one of those things where if you put it on a well tuned snare drum, it will sound like a rock snare drum.
Oh yeah.
If you put it up to a Marshall guitar amp, whatever, it will sound like a rock guitar. It's just that kind of thing where it sounds immediately what you would associate in your head with rock music, actually, but also metal.
Mm-hmm. For good reason. There are, in pretty much most commercial studios, there are about 8 or 9 SM57s.
It is pretty standard.
Yeah, they just keep them by the bucket load. So it's a pretty solid choice. I'll allow it. Next one.
Thank you very much. My next choice, this might be a bit left of field, is a Sennheiser E602, which is a kick drum microphone.
Right.
Yeah. It's probably not the most obvious kick drum choice. So it's also good for bass amps. So if you're recording a bass amp, it's got that kind of low end extension, so it will pick up all that low end as well as kick drums. Now it's a little bit scooped in the mid range, which is kind of in rock and metal is kind of what you're looking for in a kick drum. So it's naturally got a bit of an EQ curve on it, which is helpful. But it's not absolutely scooped. So it's not like there's a microphone by Audix called a D6, which is like a metal kick drum. But there is very little in terms of mid-range there, deliberately. But this is sort of a bit of a midway point. So it's got some mid-range, but it's not completely gone. That is, in my mind, honestly, a really solid choice for a kick drum, a rock kick drum and metal.
Okay, so here's my first question. And it's,
yes.
I agree with you on your choice, but just for the sake of the listener who might not know that much about recording, why wouldn't I just use an SM57 on the kick drum?
Because it sounds like pants. So SM57 is really good for loud sources, and you will. There's no reason why you can't record a kick drum with an SM57. It won't pick up the low end in the same way that this Sennheiser will. It just won't have the kind of impact and power that you really want a kick drum to have.
Agreed.
Thank you. I'm glad you're so agreeable.
Yeah, call up your next witness.
My next witness. Now, this is my... if we're going sort of around the drum kit, these are my overhead microphones. So if you are recording drums with your 4-channel interface, you've got 1 channel for kick, 1 channel for snare, and 2 for overhead microphones. So that will capture your general drum kit, but specifically you're looking for your tom drums and your cymbals of varying sorts. And this is the Octave MK012, and you can get a pair of them for just under 250 quid.
It's not bad at all.
Which is really quite good going. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
These, so it's a Russian company, which is they're a bit strange. Sort of everyone's heard of them, but it feels like no one's heard of them at the same time. But there you are.
It's the worst kept secret kind of thing.
Yeah, pretty much. They are fantastic overhead microphones. Is kind of all I really need to say about that. But they also have secondary uses. So if you are recording a bit of acoustic guitar, they would be great for that purpose too. You'd be able to get a great acoustic guitar tone with one of these microphones.
Okay, cool. I think... one question. Are they a stereo pair?
They are. Well, yes. So
they're a matched pair?
yes, they are. And in fact, they even come in a wooden box to prove the point.
See, as much as that I know is intended as a joke, between me and you, I think as engineers, it's really important that stuff comes in really nice cases. There's something about
It is.
stuff coming in really nice, pristine presentation cases that makes you...
Feel fancy.
That just makes you more excited about the gear.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, next item.
So that's my main sort of drum choices. I've then got a sort of supplementary choice, which I don't think is absolutely required, which is a Shure SM58,
Right.
which is a very similar microphone to the SM57, but it's got that sort of bobble on the end of it. Everyone knows what I mean by an SM58. I think it's like when you think of how a microphone looks, it's what everybody thinks of. It's that really classic outline, and it's got what's called a pop shield built into it, so it's naturally going to get rid of the harsh plosives. He said, trying to make as much plosive as possible that come in the human voice. So it's a really standard live microphone choice, but it can be really underrated in the studio. It really seriously underrated in the studio. A surprising amount of rock records have been made with a singer singing through an SM58. So don't discount it. It's not that it's a very similar microphone designed to the SM57, hence the similar name. And it's not that you can't use the SM57. It's just that it's got that sort of pop filter built into it, which is very helpful.
Cool. And has anything else appeared on your list?
I have a final 2 items.
Mm-hmm.
So my final 2 items is a pair or 2 pairs of headphones. So I have specifically gone for the Audio-Technica ATH M30X, a really catchy name. So you get 2 pairs of those. Audio-Technica really don't do catchy names for all their equipment, if I'm really honest with you. So they are just a really solid headphone manufacturer, and you'll be able to plug those in and be able to really hear what's going on as you record. And by my calculations, that's left me with £18.44 change, pocket change.
Damn. So my question about the headphones is, are they closed back or open back?
They are closed back indeed.
And why would that be important?
I was just about to explain. So, open back headphones, for anyone not in the know, are exactly how they sound. So the back of the actual mini speaker that sits in the headphones is open to the world, which means that when you're listening through them, you'll get a lot more of a natural kind of high-end sound to them, but they leak. So if you're recording, let's go more extreme, a really intimate sort of acoustic guitar part, and you've got a pair of open back headphones on that are blasting the song through, you'll be able to hear it through the microphone, and that will really compromise your recording. But closed back is exactly what you think they are. So the back of the miniature speaker in the headphone is closed, so it stops the sound leaking as much, and it will control the amount of sound going straight from the headphone to the microphone.
An obvious example of that is if you're recording vocal, click tracks with open back headphones.
Oh yes.
It's just going to be an absolute nightmare.
So many times I have received a vocal track, and just before they start singing, you hear it go, and it is so annoying. And Joe is laughing because he knows the truth.
Do you know what? I actually can't think of the last time that's happened to me.
Oh, is it not? Oh, okay,
No.
fair enough.
I think I appreciate I'm very lucky in that, but I'm trying to think. I don't think that's happened to me in maybe the last year or so.
Well, get you. It's happened to me. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. It's completely. It's you can work around it, but it will just ever so slightly compromise what the person mixing has to do. But yeah, so that's my major choices.
Okay.
It's worth saying my sort of aesthetic, to use a very fancy term, is that you are playing in a sort of rock band. So I don't know, you've got guitars, bass, drums, vocals, and you like the way you sound in the room. So you've got amps that you enjoy playing through and things like that. Now, it's also worth saying if that's not quite you, so if you've got, I don't know, cheaper amps that you don't particularly like the sound of, then it might be worth thinking through a different approach where you buy less microphones and you buy more plugins and things like that, which will allow you to do amp simulation and things like that. Amp simulation has come on a very, very long way in actually a really short space of time, to the point where they sound surprisingly good and surprisingly realistic. So it's not something that you should kind of ignore out of hand. But as I say, my sort of approach has been you enjoy the way you sound in the room.
Agreed. So if I were to ask you, I think we've briefly covered it, but let's kind of cover all the bases. So you're saying that it would be an overdub style of recording?
Yes. So you do your instruments one at a time. So you'd have your drummer play the groove of the song throughout the entire song, and you maybe record some what are called scratch tracks, which is just a rough take of, say, the rhythm guitar, so that he's got something to play along with. And then you'd layer on extra elements. So you'd layer on your guitars over the top of that, your bass over the top of that, and your vocals and maybe background vocals over the top of that. And then you sort of part by part build up the song.
Okay, so how would you go about recording drums then with your setup?
Ooh, well, I would place the Sennheiser mic on the kick drum. Surprise, surprise. I'd place it just inside. So most kick drums have a porthole nowadays. There's a little circle cutaway where you can see into the kick drum. I'd place it just inside there, pointing just away from the beater of the kick drum. By the way, sorry to anyone listening to this podcast right now. Describing things like this is very hard. Visual is a lot easier. But there we are. We're working the limitations of the medium. The SM57 would be on the snare drum, sort of pointing towards the middle to get the most sort of crack out of it and the most impact. Ultimately, it's rock music. We're looking for impact. And then the overheads, there are loads and loads of different ways to place overhead microphones on drum kits. And that in and of itself is worth some research. My personal favourite is what is called ORTF, which allows you to get some width on your drums, but it's not super wide. I will put an article in the show notes about drum overhead positionings, because that is a world of its own.
Okay, so how about bass?
Bass, I would. Well, it depends. If I enjoy the sound of the bass amp, then I would use the kick drum mic, so the Sennheiser E602, on one of the speakers of the bass amp. I'd basically just kind of mess about with the positioning and the distance until it sounded good. It's kind of as vague as that, really. And a lot of bass amps have a direct out, so you can get a sort of unaffected bass guitar sound. So you can take that and then plug that into the audio interface as well. If I didn't enjoy the sound of the bass amp, then I would probably plug my bass directly into the audio interface and just get the sound of the bass.
Okay, so you have an instrument input on your interface?
Yes, it's got dual inputs. So where you can plug a microphone in, you can also plug, or instead of, you can plug an instrument and go direct.
Okay, cool. I feel like that for now is the end of my questioning.
Did I pass the test?
Well, as we've established, this is competitive, so we'll see. It's not a case of passing. It's who wins is going to be the.
Surely I always win. So Joe, what's your setup? Walk and talk me through it.
So I feel like my first choice is an absolute clutch one. I'm so happy with it. I made it initially because I was really happy with loads of things, and then I read the extra bits that you got included with it, and I was so smug with myself.
Oh.
So I have gone for the Focusrite Scarlett 18i8 3rd generation.
An interesting choice.
So, it is a fantastic sounding 4 preamps included within it, all with a little air switch filter on it, A lot of people will be familiar with the first gen and second gen, which I love, and they've only made the preamps better. It's lightweight and pretty small, so it's not a rack mount thing. You can just pop it in your rucksack with like a laptop, and you've pretty much got a mini recording studio ready to go. It's expandable with other Focusrite gear. So should you, a year down the line, decide, oh, well, we want to record more inputs, you can just buy a Focusrite preamp, or you can buy like a bank of 8, and you can connect them via digital or ADAT. And then you've then kind of got, let me do a quick bit of maths, 12. You've got 12 preamps, and it's much more expandable. Because I think the thing is when you buy gear, you've always kind of got something in the back of your mind of going, oh, in a year, if I want to upgrade, I won't be able to sell this gear on for as much as I bought it. So that's one thing I try to consider, is these are things I feel like that will last you for a few years, and you can upgrade and expand. It's like Phil's choice. It's got 2 headphone outputs, which I thought is really important. So we've got, one for your inverted commas engineer or whoever's recording, and one for whoever's playing. And this is where I think it does really, really well. So you get free Focusrite plugins included with it, which are absolutely fantastic, as well as Ableton Live Lite or Pro Tools First.
Oh.
So even if you don't have, and I wish everyone could see the shock on Phil's face. So even if you don't have software, even if you just have a computer, if you get this, it will include all the software required to do the recording as well, all for the price of the interface.
I feel bested already.
So, I've not even done with what it's featuring yet.
Oh, what?
It also, like Phil, includes jack inputs as well. So if you kind of wanted to go straight in and use any of your now free software, such as amps that you get in Ableton,
So jammy.
or SansAmp, it's jammy because it's good. And then also as well, you've got MIDI input and output. So if you wanted to use synths, because I'm kind of going more down the pop indie vibe, you've kind of got that option to kind of plug straight in, or use any of Ableton's free synth stuff. You can plug that into your keyboard, and away you go.
Jammy.
Why is that jammy?
It's all I have to say. It's all I have to say, because it's a really
What's
good choice.
jammy about that?
Because it's a really good choice. Because it's more or less as good as the PreSonus, but it's got loads of extra stuff.
Exactly.
Well gutted.
So, any questions before I move on?
Not yet. Still jammy.
Okay. So my next choice is the Shure SM7B, which, if anyone who knows me or anyone who's worked with me, is the most predictable choice I could have made. So if anyone isn't aware of what the Shure SM7B, it's basically a Shure SM57, but on mega steroids. So it's got a built-in pop filter, which is great. So it does all the things that Phil was talking about. Sounds incredible on pretty much any source. So you're kind of talking snare drums, guitar amps, bass amps, kick drums, floor toms, vocals. I think I may have already mentioned. Sounds amazing on that. Acoustic guitars, I've heard it been used before, and I've used them in mixes that have done really well.
Oh.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic on anything. Hi-hats, it makes an incredible hi-hat mic, because it kind of gets a lot of low end. If you kind of going for like a darker hi-hat feel, and you're not worried about, especially if you're using small diaphragm condensers on hi-hats, it can sometimes get a bit harsh. The SM57 kind of rolls that off a little bit. Not the SM57, the SM7. And I also just want to kind of throw a quick anecdote about the SM7B out there, that I work quite a bit at Chapel Studios, that has an amazing range of microphones. And every vocal recording session that I do there, I always set up 3 mics. I always set up the SM7B, the U67, which is an incredible vintage valve mic, and the original C12.
Ooh.
If you look at how much the what I think are subpar remakes of them, they go for a few grand. So imagine how much the originals go for. And then I get the artist to record into them, do a take into each one, and then come back in and listen and make a decision. And they always do it blind. We all do it blind, so maybe the assistant will only know what one we're listening to. The SM7B comes out on top 99% of the time.
I'm not surprised.
And it really frustrates people because they want to record with the priceless mic, but they go, oh, damn, yeah, the Shure sounds great. So there's no excuse for not getting an amazing vocal sound out of if you've got a Shure
That is very true.
SM7B.
You can't really go wrong with that choice.
No, it includes a pop filter as well, which is another thing, like a really good one. So yeah, I feel like it's just going to be a workhorse that pretty much goes on everything. Okay, can I move on to my next one?
You certainly can.
So my next choice is the Audix D4,
Ooh.
which was similar to the mic that you mentioned earlier, which was the D6. But this is, again, like Phil, this is my low-end option. This is something that I can kind of see more on kick drums and on bass amps. It's something it's got a big hump around, your low end, low mid, that kind of will really help to kind of add that impact. Even if you're using sub synths and you kind of want to run that through a bass amp, which is a great trick if you are so inclined in doing that. I'd thoroughly recommend that, especially if you want to get some saturation or make it sound a bit more lively. Then an Audix D4 is great for capturing that low end. Next one.
No questions yet. I'll wait till the end before I ask my questions.
Okay. So the next one, I feel, is even more of a cheat code than the Focusrite. So this is the Lewitt LCT 040 MP. Again, a very, very catchy.
Excellent name.
Very, very catchy one. So for a round at the time of recording, it was around £155. You get a stereo matched pair of small diaphragm condensers that sound incredible. And you don't even have to take my word for it on this. If you're listening to this podcast, another person we'd thoroughly recommend checking out is someone called Warren Hewitt, who does Produce Like a Pro. He's a massive endorser of these microphones. So they work great on overheads, acoustics, piano, even if, string players, strings, back, you could get choirs and record them on this. They pretty much anything that the SM7B doesn't cover, these Lewitts will cover the rest of the spectrum. So between the two of them, you've pretty much got every bass covered. And for that price is unreal. I really don't think they can be matched in that price range. I've got in my notes insane in block capital letters. They're a real no-brainer. So my next choice are Superlux HD 681 headphones.
Oh.
So these are closed back headphones, and I'll be totally honest, they're no frills. Because I was thinking about this and I thought, if I'm a musician, I'm probably going to have headphones that I'm pretty happy with. So these are kind of they're closed back. They work great for you won't get any bleed into your vocal mic when you're doing vocals. You won't get any bleed into your overheads when recording drums, unless you're deafening your drummer, then you've got other issues. So they're just great for getting the job done, really. They're not something you could mix on, but if you're taking stuff seriously, you're probably going to get your stuff sent off for mixing anyway.
Very true.
So this is not really, and it does the job to get you to where you need to be. And more importantly, you've got two pairs. And that leaves me with £15.
Oh.
Which I was thinking, how am I going to use that £15? So I did a bit of research, and £15 will buy you 6 bottles of either Corona or Peroni in a non-London Wetherspoons.
Oh.
That I'm really going to highlight non-London. Because I once had a terrifying experience of buying a pint in central London.
Oh, no, never do that.
No, god awful. So yeah, buy you 6 bottles of either Peroni or a Corona in a non-London Wetherspoons to celebrate your successful recording session.
Alternatively, here's a potentially more musical use of that £15. On Toman, you could buy a set of shakers for extra musical excitement.
I mean,
I have some shakers
Come
from
on.
Tom M. I'm being true. I'm being true to the music. Everyone loves a shaker.
I know which would get the popular vote. That's all I'm going to say.
I can't really argue with that.
I'm playing to the crowd.
Always playing to the crowd.
So go on, begin your line of questioning.
So, very similar question.
Uh-huh.
How would you record a drum kit? What would be your approach with this setup?
So I would go with the Audix D4 on kick drum. I'd go with the SM7B on snare, and I'd go with the Lewitts as the spaced pair. And it's quite difficult to describe on the podcast how you'd use it. So if you email me, which is joe@nevisaudio.com, I can respond to you with my free drum guide that will run you through how I record drums with diagrams as to where you should position it to get an absolutely killer sound.
You're very good at this transition into
I'm a one-man plug machine.
plugging away. That is fair. I mean, fair enough. Because I can sort of answer in my head how you'd record. So you'd record guitar with an SM7B, I'm assuming.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then you'd obviously record vocals with an SM7B.
But then again, I'd probably record the guitar with an SM7B and a Lewitt as well, next to each other.
Yeah.
Then you get a bit of
more-
flavour.
Bit of taste.
Yeah, you can kind of blend them between the two. You can kind of just... Or it presents another option for your mix engineer,
Yes.
which I think is something really important to do.
And obviously you've got your MIDI in for your keyboards, if you want that way. And you've got direct ins if you've got some keys that you like the sound of.
Exactly. Or if you want to use software to record your guitar,
Yeah.
like as an amp sim, you can go directly with that. Same goes for bass. For piano, you can use the Lewitt if you are so inclined in doing that. Strings, you can use the Lewitt. Sounds great. Or you could, if you're doing a string player, then you can have a stereo pair slightly further away if it's a nice space and use the SM7 up close.
Very true.
You've just got loads of options. Even if it's a cello or a double bass, you can use the D4 to kind of get a really low end and then use the Lewitt slightly further away to capture the high end and blend the two. There's loads of options.
Yeah. I'm going to stand by my choices. However, if I were to be presented with what Joe has chosen and I was told record this band, I would be very happy with these choices.
I think there's definitely merit in both.
Yeah.
I don't feel like we could decide between the two. So I think, one, it's important that you don't have to go with either one or the other. If you like the sound of, the Lewitts, but you prefer the sound of, and when I mean sound, I don't mean literally how the microphone sounds, and if you like the sound of potentially buying them, you can mix and match. So, you might go with the overheads from my setup, you might go with the interface from Phil's setup. You can mix and match. There's no, you have to go down this way or another way.
And to be honest, mixing and matching might even be a good idea because the collective genius of both of us, obviously.
But yeah, I think it would be it'd be worthwhile potentially putting it to vote.
Oh,
So you could email us and let us know who you think's won.
quite. So, Joe, what's our email address?
Our email address is musicsurvivalguide@gmail.com.
Wow, you've got such great memory, it must be said.
I know, I got it right the first time. There totally wasn't an edit involved at all.
And what we are going to do, an extra thing we're going to do on our Facebook group, which if you haven't joined it is Music Survival Guide Podcast on Facebook, we're going to put up a poll. I think that's a good idea. Let's do that. Let's see who wins. Duke it out. Winner takes all? I don't know what I mean by all.
I don't know. Have we set a prize?
I
Or
don't know. Glory.
personal pride,
Personal pride.
self-esteem.
Fair enough. So, as we say, if you're in a band or you're wanting to record your music, these are both, I think, really great choices. They're both really worth considering. Honestly, our best advice would be if you're thinking about it and you have this kind of money, just go for it and start recording. The worst thing you can do is dither and not quite decide, because the more time you spend thinking about what you want to buy, the less time you have recording and actually making the music. Always worth putting it in that way. If you want to get in contact with us, as Joe has already said, it's the Music Survivor Guide podcast, musicsurvivorguide@gmail.com. I remember our email address. You can contact me at phil@vorticesoundstudios.com, and you can email Joe at joe@nevisaudio.com. I remember your email address.
I'd remembered yours for this week, but you beat me to it.
Haha. That's because I'm too good.
The thing I want to highlight as well is the idea of this is to get you to a stage where you can send stuff off to a mix engineer.
Yes.
So I wouldn't exactly be worried going, oh God, I'm not going to produce, the next #1 platinum album that's going to be considered one of the best for the next 50 years. You kind of just want to get to the stage where you're kind of going, okay, yeah, this is sounding cool. Reach out to someone like me and Phil, and then me and Phil will listen to it and go, yeah, that sounds cool. Maybe try these 1 or 2 things before it kind of hits mixing, and then mixing is the stage where you kind of go, oh yeah, okay, this is the real McCoy now.
That is worth saying as well. If you are recording yourselves, and you're not quite sure of something, it might be a technique, it might be an actual part that you're thinking about putting in but aren't sure about, feel free to email either myself or Joe, and we will talk to you about your project.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. To an extent, the better the song is, or the reason why we want to kind of get involved at an earlier stage than just mixing is because if we can help you record it better, then that in turn makes the mix better, and then it makes the song better, and everyone wins in that scenario. Our whole goal here is not to kind of, just cash grab and move you on. It's like we want to make the song the best it possibly can be. And for me, I want to make it sound exactly as it sounded in your head before you started recording. So don't worry about, does it need to be like this final finished thing before I send it off to a mix engineer? Like, we're perfectly happy to kind of hear some works in progress.
Oh, yes.
And also, just one final quick reminder, on the drum thing, if you are interested in recording your own drums, please send me an email, which is joe@nevisaudio.com. Just shoot me a quick message that says, hey, Joe, can I get that drum recording guide? And I'll send you the PDF.
Boom.
Boom.
So we've hoped you enjoyed this episode 10, the big celebration, home studio setup challenge, anniversary, here we come. We will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.